Hi, everyone. I'm Dan Watanabe. I'm the Deputy Sector Navigator for Information Communication Technology and Digital Media. Entertainment tends to be taught in a very old school kind of fashion. It tends to be taught almost as a completely academic subject or as one that's kind of one of the fine arts as opposed to one of the more practical arts. So what I have today is a panel of people to try to dissuade that illusion. One of the things that our grant has available is that all of the people on the panel here, as well as approximately 50 more, are available to come and help with curriculum development, to come with guest speaking engagements, to come and do conferences and panels to help instructors as well as students to understand what having a major in entertainment can be for the bigger picture of your career, whether you're directly involved in entertainment or not. So let me briefly introduce the members of our panel. At the very far end of the table is Jennifer Phillips. Jennifer is someone who I've actually known since she was a little baby, when she was the vice president of post-production at Fremantle Media. And in the process of doing that, she worked with different formats and delivering different types of TV shows around the world. Seated next to her is Scott Claus. Scott is an animator who started in the world of hand drawing at Disney and eventually moved forward into the digital technology. He is now an instructor as well, and more recently he worked on Life of Pi. So you see he encompasses that entire realm. Next to Scott is Sarah Ann Fox, also known as Saran. Saran is what's called a development exec, which is the person who takes a story that a writer comes up with and comes up with a way of making it commercial, making it viable. Some of the projects she's worked on in the past include Quest for Fire and My Favorite Year. Next to Saran is Marty Mullen. Marty is a cinematographer, a director of photography. He is someone who worked all the way from film into all of the different digital formats, including 3D. Seated next to Marty is Denise Doherty. Denise is a playwright, but she has also worked in the front office and in industrial filmmaking. So she understands how businesses need filmmakers as well. She is also going to mention a little bit about some of the workflows in theater, which is often disregarded, if I can use that term, as something that has a really solid practical outcome. And finally, seated next to me is Addison Randall. Addison was originally part of Hollywood royalty. His grandfather was Hal Roach, Little Rascals, Laurel and Hardy, etc. His father was Robert Livingston, a rival to John Wayne, and he himself has been an actor, a first assistant director, a director of numerous films for independent production companies, and currently is our expert at knowing how to do budgets, because after all, in entertainment as in any industry, money rules everything. Now, seated in the back of the room and pretending like they're not going to be seen, running the camera is Jason Williams. Jason is someone who recently returned to school, but in the past he worked on TV shows such as Cops, where he was one of the cameramen for the show. Next to him is David Novello, who is a current student right now and is helping us out with numerous things. And seated next to him is Matt Piper, who is a guy who works really, really well with sound. Even though he just disappeared out of the door, is Robert Reber. You can recognize Robert as being the guy with the longish hair. He is a former student who now is an advisor to faculty at most of the colleges in terms of what equipment to buy. So as you see, we have a complete throughput from people who are currently in school to people who have been in the industry for a number of years. I myself was an executive for a number of years at a company known as Fremantle Media. You might know them for Family Feud, for Price is Right, for American Idol, for America's Got Talent, and for the show I worked on for 11 years. And don't hold this against me, Baywatch. Anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with just throwing a general question out to the panel. And I'm going to just make it open to any of you. What do you feel is the number one thing that somebody who is learning about entertainment can have as a takeaway to another job, whether it's in entertainment or not? Jennifer.
I think accounting skills and number skills, really understanding how budgets drive business. And I guess I'm unique in the fact that I have a minor in business, but I think that the numbers are really important. Everything about our business is numbers.
Okay.
Learning that time is money, so when you work on a film production or a TV set, the set of a TV show, you have to be on time and show up and make sure that you do your job well, working well with others, respecting the chain of command, doing the hard work, never being idle, especially if you're a production assistant. So if you work in the film or TV business, you learn all these they're called soft skills, but in reality, they're skills for life and how to be accountable and responsible.
Actually, I want to throw a question out to both Saran and Denise. One of the things that they both specialize in is telling stories. Can each of you give us a little bit of an example of why being able to tell a story is so important?
Well, for one thing, telling a story is basically communication, and in my opinion, communication is the most important aspect of any kind of business. Learning to tell a story, if you've got to call a client and tell them they are not going to get their product when they desperately need it, you can't just pick up the phone, well, you're not going to get it. You're going to have to sit there, you're going to have to tell the story. And preferably the story is the truth, that's always my policy, but you're going to have to say, look, our supplier in China had a shortage. There was a typhoon. They had a shortage. We couldn't get what we needed, so we couldn't put together our circuit board so that we can't get it to you. Telling a story is nothing more than communication. It's communicating creatively, sometimes fictionally, sometimes non-fictionally, but that's basically what telling a story is. And if you can tell a good story, that means that you can communicate well.
I agree with Denise, and I can also add that creatively it sparks one's imagination because I think that life is hard work, and especially if you get married and you have kids and you have a job, there is a need for art. There's a great need in our lives for using our own imaginations and hooking into the imaginations of filmmakers and writers and artists. So for me, telling a story is very important as it enriches life in general, and also it's almost a discipline, to teach. One of the things that I've done is I ran a workshop on teaching the teachers how to teach telling a story, because very often young people, because of YouTube and TV, they'll have a great idea, and then their short film, their 10-minute films, about 5 minutes in, they run out of steam in their second act because they haven't thought through beginning, middle, and end. So it's also about accountability to your audience, and also to enrich your own life by using your imagination and sitting, I call going to the movies, dreaming in the dark with strangers. That this is a very important part of life that sometimes we overlook when we're so busy with the details of daily life. So stories are extremely, extremely important. And I'll just end by what I like to say is I think that the beats of stories are in our DNA from our ancestors sitting around the fires telling each other stories, that fairy tales and things we heard from our parents when they read to us before we went to bed. This is a very, very important part of human life, and it's my great passion in transmitting this message.
Scott. Okay, the question is, what are some of the what are some of the skills that you learn as an animator that might have that might have some play in a job outside of entertainment?
The answer is very simple. My career, such as it is, was successful because I was able to adapt. And the reason I was able to adapt is I got a few knocks at first. I wanted to take the easy route, and I wanted to learn how to be an animator and become an animator, just like that, and then just do that for the rest of my life. Again and again and again, I'm asked by the students that I'm teaching or the people I encounter, how do I become an animator? How do I become a director? How do I become a storyteller? And they say, by doing it. And meanwhile, go to school to get your life, to learn your life lessons, the things that you need to learn to be able to adapt. Then when a new technology comes along, or when a new way of thinking, or if you need to outsource, in my case, I do a lot of teaching to people overseas through video conferencing. learn how to do that. You can do that because you've learned how to learn, and that you get from school and core classes, core lessons.
Marty.
Well, are we talking about the skills that we in the industry can give people in other industries, or are we talking about the skills that students need to get a job in our industry?
We're going to come to that one next. It's how your training in entertainment could have a play outside of entertainment.
Well, you know, I end up hiring a lot of people in the primary, at entry-level positions that I'll get into in a little bit, but the primary quality I look for in somebody that I hire is something that you two touched on. My first question about a potential new hire is, do they have good sense? It's more important than job skills, more important than anything else, is good sense and the ability to adapt, the ability to change to surrounding, as your surrounding events change. And I learned that on the set, and it's a skill that you can take anywhere. And I learned it from hysterical directors running up and saying, no, it's not a night scene, we've changed it to a day scene, and you have 5 minutes. And you can either panic and slit your wrist, or you can figure out somehow, some way to make it work. And that I think is the most undervalued skill that anybody in the film industry develops. And I don't think, as educators, I don't think you can teach good sense. It almost has to be innate in the person, but it is a tremendously undervalued skill.
Addison.
It's called show business. Without the show, there is no business. But without the business, there is no show. And a lot of people forget that. The second word in there is business. And if you don't understand the business side of it, then you're not going to get to make your film, because people will always be in there trying to get their little piece of the action. So I would say that the one thing that can translate out, everybody, Pepperdine, great business school. UCLA, great show school. But to be able to take what you learn in the business side of it and adapt that into whatever career you're going to go into. Because this business creates thousands and thousands of jobs every day. Sit down and watch all of the final credits sometime. Every one of those is a job. It may not be a glory job, but it's a job, and it probably pays pretty well. So there's nothing wrong with somebody in, say, the fine arts. There's nothing wrong with taking a business course, because that's going to be able to translate out. There's nothing wrong with learning accounting, because that's going to be able to translate out. So that would be my answer to that.
Thank you, Addison.
Can I
Yes.
answer that? Because that's the inverse of the things that you learn outside of the business that you can bring into the business. As Addison said, in those end credits, every name is a job. So if you're interested in teaching, you can be a studio teacher teaching minors. If you are a nurse, you could, or someone medical, you can be a medic on the set. If you like to cook, you can become a caterer. And you can go down the list of every skill and interest, and there is a job in the entertainment business. So the inverse also works as well.
Thank you very much, Sarah Ann. One of the things that I learned from teaching a lot of classes is that there are students who are resistant to taking the entry-level courses because they are interested in playing with the technology. And one of the movements that all of us are trying to do right now is to tie every single class with a job deliverable. For example, at Valley College, we have a class called Cinema 105, which is the history of entertainment. I mean, the history of cinema. And there are a large number of students who resent having to take that class. So when I go in and make my little presentation at the beginning of the semester, I point out that this class has a job deliverable of making you either a producer, a development exec, a front office person in marketing and distribution, in advertising, in promotions. Maybe even in the international side of the business, because you actually have a foundation where you can talk about things that have worked. It also helps you to describe trends that you have seen in the past, so you can kind of back every class into a solid job. And that's an area where We're trying to put that out there so that a class like a fine arts class is not looked at as merely a general ed that's there to force you to spend that 9 hours of that 3 hours a week sitting behind a desk. The next question I'm going to ask is that a challenge that has arisen is that the technology is changing much faster than anyone at the community college level can afford to keep up with. So there's always an argument that's going back and forth. Do we spend money on getting the newest blingy technology? Do we invest in a red camera, or do we teach foundational skills with the understanding that students are going to have to adapt to whatever the technology is at that moment? So I'd like to throw that open to the panel and ask what their individual opinions are about the importance of technology skills versus aesthetic skills. Yes, Addison.
I would say that the idea of the new technology, finding the new technology, that's already out there. You can call up any rental house and ask them, I'd like to bring my kids down to see this new technology or the latest technology. And they will say yes, because they don't know who the next Spielberg is going to be. And they want to create some kind of a communication setup with you and with your students. So if you're teaching the aesthetics, but you make sure that they learn, it's a road trip, you know, Panavision. Your kids want to learn something about cameras. Okay, we call up Panavision. We say, guys, can we bring down a class and do a little quick thing on the Panavision? They will probably, 90% will say yes. Unless they are incredibly busy, they're very happy to have you come in and look at their equipment. And that goes across the board. That whether it's grip, whether it's lighting, whether it's sound, it goes across the board. These people are very happy to help you because they know that one day, one of your kids or you may come in there and say, I need to rent X, and they're going to make money off you. So don't be afraid, and I tell this to the kids when I talk to them, don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to go down and make a phone list that says, this is where we're going today or next week or that month. Because the school may not be able to afford the latest technology. And as soon as they can afford it, it's not going to be the latest technology by the time you get there. So, but these people, it's their job to keep the technology on the edge. And they can take you from film all the way up to, now I believe it's 6K digital. And they'd be very happy to tell you about it. They really will.
I kind of agree. I think that this falls into the lap of the teachers, probably more burdensome than maybe anything else, because it doesn't, you know, just the wheels of administration in school, I don't need to tell you this, they move slowly. You know, there is a procedure, so you will never be able to get the latest cutting edge technology. What you can do is you can sit in front of the computer, go on the internet, because every single company that has made the latest doodah has got a video on the internet about the latest doodah. You know, and the companies, and every year, the first weekend of every June, there's a Showbiz Expo, and that's all it is. It is the technology of the entertainment industry. So this is a burden that falls into the lap of the educators, because it is impossible to catch up with the technology, because virtually when your semester is ended or your school year is ended, you know, what was cutting edge in September, by June, it's not cutting edge anymore. By June, there's been at least 5 or 6 other new revolutions. But you can't keep up with it on the internet and pass that information on to your students if they're interested, saying, by the way, this, and this. The one thing that doesn't change is aesthetics. And that is something that I would say that should be your bedrock. A good composition, a well-composed shot is a well-composed shot no matter how you're trying to capture it. Lighting creates a certain mood. However, if the lighting happens completely in a computer, whether it happens on the set, it's going to create a mood. So I would say you have a dual purpose. You have to multitask. You have to have a solid knowledge of aesthetics, but at the same time, You have to be up on the technology in terms of the information that is available about it.
Marty, I actually had a question for you specifically, because one of the issues that has come up not only at Valley, but at some of the other schools is, do we suggest to the schools when they're making a procurement purchase that they either buy one red camera, let's say, or an area Alexa, doesn't matter what the brand is, or a number of DSLRs, the more home use cameras?
Well, this is it. I'm the hands-on guy. I'm the hardware guy. I'm the guy that's touching and messing with the cameras. And the answer, of course, Dan knows the answer, and I'll get to it in a second. But to get back to what Denise said, the question before, is that you can't possibly keep up with the information. Sony has invented 3 new cameras while we've been sitting in this room. My first high-def camera, a Vericam package that I bought, I paid exactly twice what I paid for my first house. And it was cutting edge for less than a year. So you cannot stay up with the incredible flow of new technology, new equipment, that kind of stuff. So for your school that's thinking about making a purchase, that Red 1 camera that was cutting edge and that everybody was just drooling over 3 years ago is now sitting in a rental house holding open a screen door. You're much better to invest your money in DSLR packages with a lot of lenses. This technology will stay stable. It's proven technology, and it's something that you can use. What Denise said is that teaching the fundamentals of the craft, teaching what a good shot is, teaching how you make a move, teaching how a close-up tells a different emotional story than a wide shot. These are skills that your students can take on to other levels of education. These are skills that are independent of the particular piece of technology you're using. And since the technology is changing so fast, at this level, I don't think we can try to keep up with the technology. The rental house will be glad to teach you the new technology, 1, because they're good guys, but 2, because they know that you might rent that camera and they don't want you to screw it up. So let your students learn the cutting edge technology on their own, use a more stable technology that's also going to save you a pile of money to teach them the basics of the craft.
Now, Scott, I actually had a question for you, because in your field in particular, it seems as if everything has moved in digital. And one of the things, I don't know if you were the one who mentioned, I think it was that today a lot of animators have not learned hand drawing. And so because Marty had mentioned that as learning the aesthetic skills, what are some of the old school skills that you feel are necessary that we should continue to recommend to students?
Yeah, that's easy. I get asked this question all the time with my students too. They're like, I want to have my work be exemplary. I want it to be Disney quality. And what's the difference between the one and the other, what I'm doing now and Disney quality? How do I get there? And I say, well, they're artists. First and foremost, the people that I worked with at DreamWorks and Disney and Rhythm and Hues, they're artists. And that's their great passion in life. And they see the technology as a tool that gets them there. Much like I did when I was a kid. I didn't wait until I got a camera to animate. I got postcards and flipped them. I found a book from the 1920s and I just copied what I said in there because I really wanted to do it. And so that's what I tell my students today is, to quote Sue Kaufman from Up the Down Staircase, consider it a challenge. If you don't have everything you need, make it, find it, and learn that way.
Terrific. Now, Jennifer, I had a different kind of question for you, because you've done post-production from an era when everything had to be different, had to be done more than once. For example, you had to do a PAL version of a film for Europe, and you had to do an NTSC version for here, and that included color correction and all of that. What part of your job is involved with teaching proper workflow and proper protocol so that you can make sure that things don't fall through the cracks? I see that happening a lot in post.
Well, I want to point out something. I mean, you talk about starting with film, and now we're in a digital era, and we're remastering, and we've got, separations, film where it's only one color per stream of film. But one of the ways that we got there was MIT graduates. They were engineers, and engineers created a lot of the technology that made it possible for me to do my job. I think that part of working in post, and especially worldwide, is being sensitive to the different electronics that are out there. They're not watching the same TV. You may think the Sony TV you're watching here is the same Sony TV they're watching there, but it's not. It's slightly different. And so being very sensitive to the various markets that are out there. I mean, I can tell you that I remastered 10 films, and within 7 months, the technology changed, and they all had to be remastered again, less than 2 years later. We couldn't have foreseen that. I mean, I was talking to the manufacturers. I don't think they foresaw the technology changing as fast as it did, but a new chip arose on the market. They didn't expect to be there. None of us knew it would be there, and all of a sudden we had new technology. So we were behind the times again. I mean, it's fascinating in post-production how many times has anybody seen Citizen Kane, and it's probably been remastered 30 times over the last 50 years.
The other challenge with Citizen Kane, of course, is that the camera neg no longer exists.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a whole... There are a few of those in our library, too.
Ton of those.
But yeah, I mean, and in which case, we're trying to figure out technologically how to create something that's similar that allows us to get back to the artist's original rendition. How can we get back to what Hitchcock and his DP intended for the audience in 2016 to see? How can we be as true to, what Scott created 20 years ago and what he saw in his mind? Because there's something special about that, and it communicated something. And we don't want to change that communication, because that communication is important.
Actually, Saran, I have a question for you specifically as part of where I wanted to take this conversation next. You always emphasize the importance of telling a story. What is your suggestion on the best way to teach students how to tell a story? Is it by following one of the textbooks on it? Is it by channeling something inside? What do you feel is the best way to teach storytelling first, and then secondarily script writing?
Well,
and I'm going to ask Denise the same question about playwriting.
Before I answer that, can I just say that one of the biggest technological changes in the entertainment business was the introduction of sound in 1929. You Ain't Heard Nothing Yet in The Jazz Singer, which turned the business upside down, because before then, there were always the stories, but there were summaries of what people said in those dialogue cards. So every single word was not said. It was written for the actors to act, but because it was silent. So think about that as a huge technological change that the business adapted to, actors adapted to. But before that, it was absolutely unthinkable. No, in fact, some of the studio heads didn't want sound, if I'm correct, because it seemed too big. To get back to answering Dan's question, there's several things that I can suggest to teachers, is to have your students leave their computers at home, or to shut them down and hand out paper and pencil or paper and pen, and have them write a story using the brain to hand mechanism. It's not better than, it's just different than hand to keyboard. There's something about creativity that comes from the brain to the hand, and have them write out a fairy tale, Once Upon a Time, and then have them do an Aesop's Fable. Once Upon a Time with the Princess and the Prince, and have a beginning, middle, and end, a Wicked Witch, have a villain, have a hero, a protagonist, have something at stake, somebody's tied to the railroad tracks, the monster's taken away the girl, whatever it is, but to have an outcome that is satisfying to a reader, and then to do an Aesop's Fable where there is a moral, and to give the students the moral, and then say, write an Aesop's Fable, and of course they will have read fairy tales before and read some of Aesop. To go back to basics, because these are the basics of storytelling. Another one is to play the telephone game, where each person does a sentence, does the next sentence. I throw out, you would throw out a scenario and say, a young girl is walking her dog and it runs away, and it gets off the leash and runs away from her. Then Jennifer, and then we would go down the line, and each one of us would add a sentence that would make sense, as if we were all getting together to write this story. Those are two of the tools that teachers can use that really go back to basics in getting students to understand that every story has a beginning, a middle, and a satisfying ending. Now, the ending may be bittersweet. The boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy gets girl, boy loses girl again, but learns a lesson. So it doesn't have to be tied up in a nice little bow, but there has to be some element of satisfaction and some message that is not, that the audience can get on their own. I don't like movies or TV shows that tell me what the message is. I think it's up to the audience, the filmmaker, to allow the audience to get their own, and the storyteller to get their own message. So these are just a few of the things that I would suggest to teachers to use to help their students tell complete and satisfying stories.
Denise, I have a slightly different question for you. That during lunch you had brought up that one of the things about plays, which is considered the ultimate entertainment older school technology, what is the importance of maintaining doing live performances?
Well, in an educational system, plays, I think, are underrated in terms of the real-world job skills. The parallels of real-world job skills. If you want to be in a play, you go to an audition. Every job interview is an audition. You know, you interview for a job, you're auditioning for that job. And emotionally, you're going to be in the same place for an audition for a part in a play as you would be for a job. They're going to experience the same nervousness, the same, are they going to like me, are they not going to like me? If you're smart, you know, in a job interview, you invent a script, and you run that script at least over in your head. In a play audition, you usually have to come with a prepared place. So that's where they're parallel in real world. Let's say you get into the play. Now you have a schedule. You are going to be given a schedule. You're going to be expected to show up for rehearsals on time, and you are going to be expected to participate. You're going to be expected to know your lines by a certain time. These are two things. I mean, if you don't show up for your rehearsals in a play, you're kicked out of the play. What happens when you don't show up for your job? You're fired. So this is a real world parallel. Memorizing by X date. Every job, maybe not every aspect of every job, but some aspect of every job has a deadline. So it gets students prepared for deadlines. Let's say you're crewing a job. You have a job to do. Maybe you're not there for the full rehearsal period. Let's say you're just there for the last 2 weeks, but you have a job to do. And you learn that if you don't do your job, nobody else can do their job. Let's say you do props in a murder mystery where one character shoots another in the first act, and the whole rest of the play is about the murder mystery. Well, what happens if the prop person forgets to lay the gun out for the actor in the first act? And the actor's got to run on stage, and they don't have a gun. I mean, what happens to the play? What happens to the actor, besides the fact that they'll kill you? And what happens to the play? So you learn that if you don't do your job, everybody else cannot do their job. Again, cues, you need to pay attention to what's going on. If you're lighting, you need to pay attention. You need to pay attention to what's going on around you. You need to make sure the lights are going to come up or go down at the right time. If you are the stage manager, then you have to be there completely through every rehearsal, making all of the director's notes, and you are the head of everyone. So you are running a crew. Anybody who stage manages a play in an educational system has a very important job, and it's a very, very good staging for the real world work. Because you're going to be, when that play goes up, the director is no longer involved with that play. That play belongs to the stage manager. And they have to know how to coordinate everything. They have to know how to organize their people and make sure everything gets done. That's a very, very important real-world job skill. So plays are probably one of the best things that a school can do to prepare its students for real-world experiences.
Thank you for that. Addison, because you've had so many of the quote-unquote below the line, the craft jobs in your career, can you tell us a couple of areas that you feel are lacking in at least on the community college level, community college education.
Boy, that's interesting.
Or what skills do you feel that students need to learn in a class that they are not being taught? Let's make it easier,
Well,
instead of saying there's a whole class that's missing.
let me think about that for a minute, because it's, well, what I can do is I'll relate a story to you, and hopefully you'll understand what I'm trying to get at. I was lucky enough to be asked to direct one of the summer shows at Pasadena City College. And we went through the whole thing, and they do these on video. They have a complete television studio set up. It's a very nice area to work at. And come the day of the taping, everybody showed up on time, and we got them some food and everything like that. And we were, I don't know, about an hour into the taping, and in comes this one young lady, and she goes, "Well, I'm here." And I said, "Yes, you are. You're fired." And she said, "What?" I said, "You heard me. You're fired." And everybody in the room turned around with their jaws open. "But you, what? But she's," I said, "I don't care what she's." I said, "She said she wanted to be in this job." And I said, "Your call time was X. If you can't be here, I don't have time, nor do I have the inclination to keep you around. I'm sorry. This is the way the world works." And there was this long silence on everybody's part. And she said, "Well, can I at least stay and watch?" I said, "Of course. But it's your grade." And when I talked to the instructor, he sort of frowned and said, "I see." So it hurt her grade. So it's again, I have to go back to the old, it's show business. It's the things that, it's not just because you've got a little phone in your hand and you got a camera on there that you go out and make a movie. There's a whole lot of things involved in the making of that, and every job down the line, there's got to be one class classes that I myself would not have wanted to take, but accounting, as I mentioned before. Accounting, business law, simple math. Business law. There is somebody wants to do a film, and somebody else has to go out and research, are the names all right to use? And you find one that's not, you have to go to your lawyer, you have to ask them, can we use this name? And the lawyer will say, entertainment lawyer, yay or nay. So right there, somebody wants to get into law, hey, take your law courses. But take an acting course too, because if you're going to be a lawyer, you really want to get used to standing up in front of people and saying to be or not to be.
Actually, I had one yes.
Everybody seems to be getting back to a small group of skills that people need to be able to be successful in this industry. And it's what Dan we call soft skills. Mm-hmm. This young lady that showed up for the play not on time, she didn't have good sense, she didn't have an idea, hadn't been taught the skill of being on time, of being prompt. When you go for your job interview and tell your story, you've got to have the skill of being able to present yourself like that. I think it's the skills that are not being, the motion picture business, how many of y'all are involved in the motion picture business in any way? Just stick your hands up in the air. Anybody? One, two, well, these are the guys in the back. The guy with the camera, of course he is. We got one here. Okay, well, the motion picture business is structured on short-term employment. I do a lot of commercials. For me, a commercial is one day. I'm working maybe a day of pre-production, a day of shooting, and then I'm out of work. Even a feature film. I am hired, we've got a few weeks of meetings, you shoot for a month or so, then I am out of work. These job skills, you constantly need to be rehired. The skills that we need to teach our kids, it's a structure where you've got a few chiefs, a few Indians, and then a few lower than Indians. And these are the entry-level skills, that entry-level positions for which we need to teach the skills. I'm not going to hire a DP out of college. I'm not going to hire a DP's assistant or a gaffer or something out of college. I'm going to hire the kid that says, do you want that blacker with cream and sugar? These are the kind of interpersonal skills, how to be nice to somebody on set, how to find out what the political landscape is and adapt to it. These are the skills that are not being taught, I think, frequently, and these are the skills that are germane to the entry-level positions.
Yeah, if I can bounce off that and tell a story. Just a couple months ago, I was up in the morning, I turned on television, and there was a Today Show, and there was a phone interview. And, you know, the woman on the phone interview said, yeah, you know, and they were talking about her career. I came in the middle of it, so I didn't know who it was or what it was about. And she said, yeah, you really have to learn, you have to be able to get along with people. The person they were interviewing was Jennifer Lopez. Now, whether or not, you know, you think she's talented or not, you know, or whatever, this woman had managed to maintain a career in an extremely difficult business, particularly if you're a woman over a certain age.
Actually,
this was her message.
Jennifer had a comment?
You have to be able to get along with people. And the two interviewers on the Today Show, these are women who work on the Today Show. They agree, and they each of them said, I would rather work with somebody who is good and pleasant to get along with than someone who is brilliant and not pleasant to get along with.
Great advice.
Absolutely. Jennifer, you had a...
I think one of the things, and maybe this is true for many careers today, is our changing landscape of employment has led to a lot of contract employment, where you might work for somebody for, as Marty said, 3 days or 3 months or 6 months, and that's not necessarily coming with unemployment insurance where you can file for unemployment because you've only worked 3 days. And so I think learning to budget money. I don't know how many young students I've seen, they get their first job and they run out and they spend a month's worth of their pay. And you want to say, you may not work again for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 3 months. And knowing how to bank and budget money is really important, I think, in the contract environment that we're working in. Because as I said, you might work 3 months, you might work 3 weeks, you might work 3 days. And that's a really simple skill, you know, along with people who write the next Star Wars and walk out thinking they can make it on $5,000. They really need to learn how to budget how much that script is that they just wrote. How many people is going to take? What kind of camera do I need? Do I need visual effects? Can I afford visual effects? Those very simple things.
Saran, you had a comment?
Well, this is the story that these people have heard many times, but about 20 years ago, my friend's son was a production assistant on a Jack Lemmon film, and it rained all the time, and he had a standard poodle that he loved and kept in his trailer. And at a production meeting, the first AD said, who wants to walk Jack's dog 3 times a day? Because he was on set all the time. Nobody raised their hand, but my friend's son did. And 3 times a day, he walked that poodle for 12 weeks. And needless to say, he was hired again by the producer on the producer's next project, and pretty soon he was not a production assistant anymore. He was a second assistant director, and he moved up because he did the job no one else wanted to do. And so he just raised his hand, because to keep the star happy and keep that dog exercised was vital to the success of this production. And so he did a very wise thing. Who the heck wants to walk a dog 3 times in the rain? But he did it. And now he's got a career.
Yeah, I want to bounce off that, because absolutely, when I was working for a company that did industrial films, one of the things I did was to find crew, and there was a time when I couldn't find a PA. I mean, they had a whole list of PAs in their computer system, but I couldn't find a PA, production assistant. Thank you, Marty. Because they all moved on. So if you're willing to do this, you're not going to be walking a dog for the rest of your life in this business. But, you know, don't be too proud to do the grunt work, because if you are easy to get along, if you you show up early, don't you, what do we say? Early is on time is late, and late is fired. Be there early, like I say, learn the hierarchy, be respectable, be pleasant. You will not stay a PA for long. And you will also get a chance to find out what it is you're interested in on a set.
What I would like to do now is to toss it open to any of you. If you have any questions for our panelists. Yes?
So, is that where you start?
sometimes you just have to be a strong back. I would suggest, like I say, if you're under 18, and, make sure your parents are cool with it, but go to colleges and find out student productions. It's an excellent way to get in. And it wouldn't hurt to learn what lighting is. What is there's, a Mole Richardson book, or there's some little book, that book, that has all of the lighting and everything in it. But you can really just say, look, I just want to be a pair of hands. Because we've used people who are just a pair of hands. Guys have a bit of an edge because they can lift things and carry things, but I've seen girls who do the same thing. You just have to be willing to help.
I've seen girl grips with love and hate tattooed on their knuckles.
Yeah. And another thing, and it may just sound totally out there and not relevant, but again, girls, particularly boys, have a good driving record. Because when I was working at J.L. Fisher, which rented out dolly equipment, almost all of the drivers were young guys. And if you're going to be driving a truck, learn how to drive a truck and have a good driving record so that people will want to hire you. Nobody's going to want to hire you if you wreck their truck. Because inside that truck will be somebody else's equipment, and they'll get really froggy if you wreck their equipment in the process of wrecking their truck.
And I think it's evident from everything that's been said, you don't need a college degree or any college courses, because this is like real world stuff. You have to be willing and able.
I will say this, though, many production companies prefer students that are over 18 because of insurance issues. And also, if they have some college, even if it's community college, they tend to be favored above high school students, partially for maturity.
Right, it's the maturity of the kid.
Yeah.
I think it's more than anything else. I don't care how old they are. If they show up and act like a jerk, they're not coming back. And on the other hand, assuming they don't look like a baby, as long as they know how to handle themselves and act well.
And dress appropriately.
And dress appropriately, they're fine. And in terms of the people on that level I hire, a PA doesn't need to know a whole lot of technical stuff, and even a beginning grip. Those are the areas where I'll hire inexperienced people. A beginning grip or a beginning electrician.
What does a grip do?
A grip is the guy that carries cases, sets up scenery, sets up light control devices. An electrician is a person that puts a light on a light stand and plugs it in. Entry-level positions in these departments basically take those cases over there and bring them over there and then stand by. And if they can do that in a timely manner and keep their mouth shut when they aren't supposed to talk, which is an undervalued skill,
Oh, God, really?
then they're fine.
I actually had a question here. Is there anyone here who teaches cinema, media arts, or a broadcasting class, or a theater class, or an acting class? No. Okay. Yes.
My position is, I'm a career technical education advisor with LA Unified.
There's a microphone there for you if you want it.
I'm sorry. Oh. Hi. Anyway, you can tell I don't use a microphone. I am a career technical education advisor with Los Angeles Unified. The industry sector you are in of arts, media, and entertainment probably makes up 40% of our pathways in the school district. I have several teachers. Lots of minor, either production managerial arts or design visual media arts, which is, so I have animators, lots of stage tech, schools in the city, that have excellent programs. And while I can provide them the equipment, that isn't a problem for us. They want to come to me and say, give me $30,000 worth of, stuff. It's like, fine, is that all you want?
I want your number.
So,
Yeah, we all want your number.
Can we talk to you?
and so, what they do need, because most of my teachers teach 6 periods a day, and because they are doing stage productions, they are there until all hours, is professionals to come into their classrooms. So
Funny you should mention that.
that's
Like
what
said,
I
we've
would
got-
love.
We have, there are 67
and all
of us.
aspects.
There are 67 of us. We will talk after this session is
Excellent.
over, and you just
Perfect.
let me know who you need,
Great.
and we will arrange for them to come by, give guest lectures. You want us to do a panel? One of the fun things that we
Great.
do is we actually do a production from concept through delivery, where we invite the students to the students who are actors, they come up and audition. The students who are writers, they come up with the stories. The students who want to be directors, we make them try to direct something. It's all mock, but it's something where they actually get to physically see what it's like to take an idea all the way from concept through the time that you're going to deliver it. And that's what we're trying to teach. We're trying to teach workflow. We're trying to have people understand that what they're doing here actually has an impact all the way down the line.
And Dan?
Yes.
Also the program with the 48-hour PSAs that we did.
Yes.
Where the students came in, and in 48 hours, well, it wasn't really 48 hours, it was an all-day Saturday, all-day Sunday. They had pre-scripted before they got there and cast. We helped them create
Yep.
PSAs that were amazing, and they were high school students.
So yes, we have all of that. In fact, over the summer, we're going to be doing a production assistant boot camp that will count as internships for high school.
Wow.
So we will be, so yes, this is all stuff that we're trying to do to help make training in this sector, because I'll tell you the dirty little secret. And this is something my sector navigator knows that I talk about, but the other DSNs around the state don't, is I say that entertainment is the entry-level drug, is the gateway drug. And it's bad to use that analogy, I know. But if somebody is smart enough to use Marty and learn how to read and run a camera through the menus, or Jennifer through the post, or Scott through the animation programs, or Saran and Denise, all of a sudden, in terms of their summer work, in terms of their hiatus work, they can get a Cisco cert. But they're not afraid of it anymore, because they already are familiar with menu structure. So one of the things that we try to do is we try to use the thing that's fun to allow students, especially those in the community college and the K through 12 in impacted neighborhoods, is that no, you don't have to be afraid of math. You don't have to be afraid of the technology. It is something that can work for you. Let's do it fun first. Let's start with entertainment. If entertainment becomes a challenge, you can move it somewhere else. No, the president of, I think it's Wells Fargo, California, started life as an actor. How did he become president of Wells Fargo? I think California did it because he was the only person who understood how his personality worked, and he could stand up in front of a room and make them think he actually cared about the statistics he was telling and that he actually understood it. And from his ability to be verbal, he was able to rise in the corporate structure. So entertainment works across the board. Yes? Mm-hmm.
Okay. We service students mostly with mild to moderate disabilities. Are there areas that these students could benefit from the types of?
Absolutely, especially storytelling. And let me tell you something. I won't mention names, but a couple of the people who are in our professional expert realm are people with developmental disabilities of one or another, or people who are differently abled. And they are able to work in it to the point where, if I mentioned who I was talking about, all of you would be shocked.
I know one of them.
Yes.
Because I employed one of them.
Yep.
So what would be the starting, you said
The starting thing is you just
storytelling.
drop me an email, and then we figure who among our people is the one who can relate the best.
Got it.
In fact, sitting in the back of the room is Phil Biedrone. He is one of our professional experts. He's also an actor, and he is very good at helping students realize how to get over their fears of appearing in public and performing. So he knows how to direct them from a less intimidating level. So we've, like I said, we're here to be of service to those of you who would like to move forward in this particular arena, because certainly there's a lot of students, the demand is there, and because of the California tax incentives, there's a lot of new jobs coming in. And by the way, you might not know this, but we offer the training through the California Film Commission, that they have worked with us in order for us to provide them with internships and all of that, because they want to have a greater diverse workforce. And not to knock any of the private four-year schools, those schools tend to be very ivory tower in terms of who their student body is. And whereas the community college level, and we can't really do high school for that, but from the community college level, you have people from all different walks of life, all different ethnicities, and particularly people who the industry, especially after this past year, are concerned about the industry becoming increasingly monochromatic. And as a final thing, and I'll give you a little bit of a, because I was an executive, when I was an executive 30 years ago, there were more opportunities for minorities than there are today. And that is something that we need to see changed. So that's my soapbox. Thank you all for participating with us. Please feel free to see me, and I will give you my card, and we will be moving forward. Thank you.